Jesus, remove distractions from us now, and we pray for protection over this time. May we hear from you, and be open to what you have to say, Lord. Amen.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Okay. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth like gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. It is mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throne monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the true attribute of awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy sits above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. And earthly power doth show like as God's when mercy seasons justice. Therefore do, got to try and remember this, the sleep deprivation. Though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the natural course of justice, none of us shall see salvation. We do pray for mercy. And that same prayer doth teach us to render deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which, if thou wouldst follow the strict laws of this court of Venice, must needs give sentence against the merchant there. That is Portia's soliloquy from The Merchant of Venice, a Shakespearean play. Oh, thanks. Embarrassing. You have full permission to tease me mercilessly about that later. But the reason I couldn't resist doing that, something that I learnt so much from my theatre studies A-level when I was 18, too long ago to mention how long ago, is because what Shakespeare does in those few short lines, I think, captures the tension between mercy and justice and how that plays out in our world in a way that this story introduces. And I'm going to go into that a bit more later. But first, we're going to read the story. We had it brilliantly acted out. Thanks so much for that sketch, guys. And then we're going to get into it. The parable of the unmerciful servant, Matthew 18, verse 21. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, cancelled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Quite glad Josh didn't do that earlier. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I cancelled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all that he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Okay. I'm going to do something quite Claudia now. I'm Claudia, by the way, for anyone I haven't met. Even more Claudia than starting my sermon with a Shakespearean soliloquy. And I'm going to skip to the end. This is something that Thomas finds needlessly annoying about me, is that I cannot handle the tension of an unfolding plot. I have to skip to the end of a book, find out what happens, and then I can enjoy the descriptive detail. I can't read the descriptive detail unless I know what's going to happen. And I'm going to skip to the end here because the end of this story in a series on grace sounds quite harsh. For those of you that were here last week when Thomas was sharing on the free gift of grace from the story of the workers in the vineyard, you may remember that, in summary, grace is a free gift for everyone, no matter if you're late or early, no matter if you've done horrendous things against people or if you've just been a bit selfish and greedy. It is a free gift from God for us all. So I can't blame you if you come to this story and see how the story ends and think, whoa, 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 now grace seems to have conditions, and that condition is forgiving other people. That doesn't make any sense. But as Tim Keller puts it, what I would put to you is actually Jesus is not being inconsistent here. He is being realistic. There is a key theory in the way that Jesus speaks about the kingdom of heaven that is weaved through the Gospel of Matthew. And that is summarized in Matthew 12, verse 33, which says, "Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit." And what that means is your outward behavior illustrates what's going on in your heart and the state of it. And so when Jesus tells this story about the fate of the unmerciful servant, he is being realistic about someone who is caught in resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness, and what that says about their heart. Because what it says is that they have not truly been transformed by the absolutely outrageously resplendent mercy of God. And we see Jesus do that again in Matthew 25. There's a story about the sheep and the goats that Jesus tells, where he's talking about separating the people who will go to the kingdom of heaven and the people that won't. It's not something we talk about probably enough, actually, that he does say this story. And he says to a group of people, "You did not feed me when I was hungry. You did not clothe me when I was naked." And these people say, "What? Like, when did we not clothe you? When did we not feed you?" And he said, "Because you ignored the suffering of other people, because you ignored the naked and the hungry, you were ignoring me." That tells me the state of your heart. That tells me what's going on inside, because your behavior was not changed by what I have done for you. And it's the same in this story. The servant was not transformed by the act of the master. Oh, have we been transformed by the acts of God? And you might think, well, hold on a sec. I totally get the God thing. I believe in Jesus. I believe that he came. I believe that he died. I thought that was it. But what's interesting is that this story is told in the context of a journey of a lifetime. Peter says to Jesus, "How many times do I need to forgive someone? 7 times? And the reason he said that is because at the time, there was a rabbi traveling around saying, "You need to forgive people 6 times. And Peter's like, "I know Jesus. He'll want us to give 1 more time of forgiveness." And Jesus is like, wow, he's really not getting this. It's not 7 times, it's 77 times. And then actually in some other translations, it might be 70 times 7. The point is the number's arbitrary. Forgive, 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 right? It's in the context of a journey. And that's why I've got a little compass. Someone looking Neil. I mean, I was quite proud of that slide, but it's fine. Don't worry. It's in the context of a journey of our lives. And my dad, he describes his conversion as a series of events, which I find really helpful. And this might explain why you can be someone who knows Jesus, but someone whose heart isn't fully transformed. If you're someone who you look inside yourself and you're like, I know I carry bitterness. I know I carry resentment. But I also know that I know God. How is this working if it's not compatible? My dad says when he became to know Jesus in his 40s, he said it was kind of a series of phases. The first one was he thought Christians went from being weird to quite nice. He was like, okay. He started going to Alpha with my mum in Tokyo in Japan, and he was like, Christians are okay. They're not all fruitcakes, which is what he thought before. Quite rude, but anyway. Yeah, he was like, I can handle Christians. I can be around them without getting irritated. Okay, I'm up for this. And then what happened is he did the Alpha course, he read the Bible, and he was like, wow, a lot of this makes sense about humanity. I totally get the God thing. It logically, theologically, I understand it. And actually, yeah, I think I do believe in Jesus. I believe that he was a person in history who might have changed the foreseeable time and space and everything. And he calls that his cerebral conversion. He had the renewal of his mind. His mind had transformed. He got it. However, the thing that led my dad to leave his unbelievably successful job and become someone that was present in my life as a child at the age of 49 was that his heart was transformed by God. And that didn't happen at the same time as the cerebral conversion. Later on, him and my mum had a horrendous argument on a beach in Thailand. It's a long story. I'll go into it afterwards if you want to. I can't do it here. And what they were confronted they were in this place of paradise. I've told the story before. And they were confronted with the fact, oh gosh, we're the problem. Why are we miserable? We're on this epic beach and we're miserable. We're the problem. We might need Jesus. And they had that moment where they were like, oh my gosh, we need God. And then further, an even more epic story that should become a Hollywood movie, which involves a Miami prison and my mum having to orchestrate an escape from the British press for one of their friends. Long story. It's so epic. My parents had to pray for the first time. They had to ask God to intervene because it was a situation with all odds stacked against. People here might have experienced that for themselves. And God intervened. And my dad went, oh my gosh, you're listening. And he said that is when his heart changed. That is when he thought, what am I doing, abandoning my family for work? That is when he thought, I'm getting too angry whenever I drink, so I'm going to stop drinking. That is when everything unraveled for my father. And so if you're sitting here thinking, I feel like I'm in the grey, I get Jesus, but I'm angry at what that person did to me, and I don't feel like I can forgive them. If you're in the grey, then my plea for you today is ask God, amazing grace that we sang about this morning. What a great opener that was, by the way. Great shout, Thomas. Ask that amazing grace to flow through your heart, every cavern of your soul, which is a lyric from another song I'm stealing, every cavern of your soul to come through and bring the transformation that allows you to let go of that. And you might ask, how can I forgive? Because I don't want to be flippant about forgiveness. Because I know that there will be people in this room who have had suffering so extreme at the hands of someone else. And even there will be people in this room who have had hurt that has shaped them as they are forever. How can I forgive that person for what they did? But the thing is about Jesus is that in this totally bewilderingly, amazingly subtle story, Jesus gives us the tools for how we can and how we do forgiveness. And that is through the example of the Master. How can I forgive? What about justice? What about the fact that I was actually hurt? But what the Master does in how he can forgive is he cancels the debt. Surely that is unfair. Jesus starts off the framing the thing with hyperbole, which he over-exaggerates. So he says, the servant owed 10,000 bags of gold. Now, that would have been 200 years' worth of salary. It's an insurmountable sum. There's no way the servant would have paid it. But what he was doing by setting that up is he was trying to show how extreme the cancelling of the debt was for the master, the extent of the loss that the master was taking on in order to forgive the servant. But this is the thing about forgiveness, is it is not weak, it does not ignore, it does not gaslight, it does not overlook, it does not dilute your hurt. Forgiveness sees it. Forgiveness acknowledges pain. The only problem with forgiveness is that the pain is acknowledged by the forgiver. It is the forgiver who absorbs the loss. It is the master who takes on the loss of the 10,000 bags of gold. And when we forgive, we take on the loss of the hurt that we received. Sounds radical, but the thing about Jesus is I really hope that's not our child. Is it not? Okay. The thing about Jesus is that he never asks us to do something that he doesn't do himself. And this is why the cross happened. It's awful, humiliating, excruciating, awful way to die. This unfair way that Jesus died, because he is the forgiver. He absorbs the loss, the pain, the hurt from everything that we have done and that has been done to us. He is the forgiver. How can I forgive? Because Jesus did it first. Justice is not negated by forgiveness, it is reversed. It is reversed onto us. But how do you get there? How do you get there? Because the thing is about forgiveness is that it's the only thing that truly will free you from the hurt you received. If you think about it, in the natural course of justice, to quote Shakespeare, the natural course of justice, actually, reparation and retribution doesn't take away the hurt that you experienced. Let's say someone commits a crime against you. Can the debt ever really be repaid of that hurt, of that fear that you felt in that moment, of that trauma that you now have to live with? Does someone's punishment ever actually truly satisfy that? No. You still have to live with the effects of that trauma. You still are there experiencing that in your daily life. You are still shaped by that. You still make decisions based on it. The reason that Jesus offers us forgiveness is because it is the only thing that frees us. And that is why the use of prison imagery is so weaved into this story, because Jesus wants us to free us from being imprisoned by our resentment, by our lack of forgiveness. Rachel Tulloch, who's a really interesting thinker, she says, hurt and pain is not reversible. Punishing a guilty person does not undo the hurt either. So how do you do it? Again, this story shows you. When the master is confronted with the servant on his knees in front of him, he pities him. Now, pitying is something that we've got an interesting relationship with, and in the English-speaking world. We're kind of like, pity is something that you don't want to receive, you don't want to give. It's interesting. But actually, pitying humanizes. He didn't view that servant as a one-dimensional debt ower. He saw the servant in the context of his family. That's why Jesus included that detail. He saw him as three-dimensional. And so if you are stuck in a place of bitterness and resentment, humanize the person who caused that pain. Bring in the context. Because the thing is when I snap at Elijah, I know I snap at Elijah. I actually snap at my amazing son. Isn't that awful? Ugh. When I snap at him out of frustration, I can very easily go, well, you see, I get very triggered because I had an experience as a child which meant this and this and this. And I understand the three-dimensional perspective on why I behave that way. But Elijah doesn't. He just thinks, Mommy snapped at me. He has a one-dimensional view of that thing. And so you're the Elijah. You have a one-dimensional perspective on why that person treated you that way. And what Jesus does is he invites you to humanize them. And again, you might say, well, we're not like this story. These people might not be acknowledging their debt the way that the servant does, kneeling at the feet of the master saying, have patience with me. But Jesus didn't have the Roman soldiers kneeling while he was on the cross. He didn't have the Jewish leaders kneeling either. In fact, they were humiliating him further by bartering his clothes, and he turned his face to the sky and said, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. In their ignorance, he humanized them. In his torture and his humiliation, he humanized the people hurting him. He sets us that example. How do I forgive? You humanize the person that you're holding resentment against. How can I forgive? Justice is not negated, it's reversed. But the thing is that this whole story flows from one significant act, and that is a wealth of mercy. Jesus forgives you. And I don't know whether what relationship you have with that. You might think, I'm not sure that I need forgiveness. I'm a good person. That might be the thing. I'm a good person. But the thing is that for Jesus, in the sheep and the goats, ignoring the suffering of other people, getting on with your own isolated life is enough to be excluded from the kingdom of heaven, because it shows that you don't really fully take on God's mercy. For Jesus, holding bitterness and resentment is enough to exclude us. What? So you probably are a good person, but you might have resentment and bitterness. You probably are a good person, but you might be ignoring the suffering of a world that is very difficult to ignore. You know? But the thing is that you are forgiven. And I want to tell a story from my life that illustrates this. When I left school, I went on this big gap year. Loads of people know about that. I won't bore you with it. But I was really struggling with the concept of God's love for me. I think my faith was based on fear of not being included in heaven rather than an actual living relationship with God. And I was going through some prayer about that with some of the women in Hong Kong. And one of the things that really came up was my body image and the way I saw myself as kind of to be shamed of. And it was so fascinating because this woman, when she was praying for me, she was like, I just want you to know that Jesus forgives you for not loving your body. And you could say, and I would say, whoa, 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 whoa. The only reason I don't have a great relationship with my body is because, well, I was at school, girls were very mean. And also there one particular girl, when I was 11 years old, she said, do you feel weird that your sister's more beautiful than you? And it literally put a separation between my sister and I there and then that my sister had nothing to do with. That was so devastating, it shattered the purity of our relationship. And I hadn't realized that had kind of caused, ricocheted through my life, that one comment, and determined the relationship between my sister and me, determined the relationship between me and my body. And she looked at me and she said, God forgives you for not loving your body, okay? And even, I don't know, I feel like in society, loads of people will be like, but that's okay that you were like that. It's so reasonable. But what that forgiveness did was, boom, it freed me. It freed me from the shame I had about what that person had spoken over my life. It freed me to have a healthier relationship with my sister. It freed me to have a healthier relationship with my body, with how I looked. And that's the thing about God's forgiveness, is that we can get so pernickety, I'm not sure about sin, I'm not sure this is wrong. But if something has got you chained, bring in God's forgiveness and you will be free. Yeah? If something has you chained, bring in God's forgiveness and you will be free. And you might not have the perspective on it to understand where you've made choices to perpetuate that enslavement, where I have also bought into the toxic view on women's bodies, where I've made choices to be mean about other girls because I'm in competition with them. Yeah, so invite the forgiveness of God, the overwhelming, amazing mercy of God, which covers over all the choices, all the bleak choices of humanity, into your life to completely transform your heart. And out of that will flow the capacity to let go of that bitterness that chains you. Not the other way around. We can't do it first. He has to show us how. And the amazing good news is he already has through the cross. Okay, I'm going to pray. That was quite intense. It's heavy stuff. My family and I didn't get any sleep last night, and I'm pretty sure it's because I was talking about the cross today. So I'm going to pray for all of us. If you are someone who thinks, I love Jesus, but I know I've got a problem with bitterness or resentment, please get prayer today. Ask me, ask Thomas. We can, if it's not us, if our children are kicking off, we will find good people we know to pray with you as well, but we will try and pray with you too. Please get prayer. Have that moment that I did way back in Hong Kong when I was 18 years old, where I experienced the powerful, powerful move of God free me from my chains, Have that experience. Don't hold back. Don't go another day.